Okay, so we're going to head back to 18th century England for one of the absolute strangest, most scandalous stories you've ever heard. Seriously. It's a tale of monstrous births, clueless royal doctors, and a national obsession that all kicked off with one completely unbelievable piece of news. So picture this. It's the autumn of 1726, and this report lands in London. Now, this was a city obsessed with news. You had workmen starting their day in coffee houses just to devour the latest papers. And this story, coming out of the small town of Godalming, well, it was just irresistible. It grabbed the entire nation's attention and set the stage for a medical drama that was just bizarre. And right at the very center of this whole storm was one woman, Mary Toft of Godalming. Now, Mary Toft was a poor, illiterate 25-year-old servant. She was married and already had 3 kids. Her explanation for all this might sound totally bonkers to us, but it was actually kind of rooted in the beliefs of the time. She said that while she was pregnant, she'd been chasing a rabbit for dinner, but it got away. And afterwards, she just couldn't stop thinking about it, dreaming of this rabbit stew she could never afford. What started as just a local curiosity, a bit of gossip, it escalated fast. The first so-called birth was just a mess of animal parts. But pretty soon, a local surgeon and a man midwife named John Howard was called in. Now, he was skeptical at first, of course, but after he personally witnessed a series of these deliveries, we're talking cat legs, a rabbit head, and then whole dead baby rabbits, he became a total believer. He started pickling the specimens in jars and firing off letters to the most famous medical men in London. Now, here's where things get really interesting. This bizarre tale didn't just stay a local rumor. Oh no, it went all the way up to the highest level of society, the court of King George I. Saint Andre, he was a Swiss-born surgeon with a real flair for the dramatic, and he had a history of charming his way into high society. He shows up at John Howard's house with just impeccable timing, right as Mary was supposedly in the late stages of labor with her 15th rabbit. He witnessed the birth, and just like that, he was completely convinced the whole thing was genuine. So, you've got to be asking, why would a royal surgeon believe such an incredible story? Well, to get that, we need to look at this now totally debunked medical theory. The basic idea was that a pregnant woman's intense cravings, or, a shocking experience, could literally stamp an image onto her unborn child. Mary's craving for rabbit fit this theory absolutely perfectly. And this wasn't just folklore. Respected medical books from the time actually told pregnant women to avoid playing with their pets, just in case their kids were born looking like them. This case just perfectly captures the divide in the medical community at the time. You had Saint Andre, who was all in. He even did this experiment where he floated a piece of rabbit lung in water. When it floated, he took it as proof the rabbit had breathed air, but then somehow decided this happened inside the womb. He came up with this whole theory that the rabbits were growing in her fallopian tubes. But the king's other surgeon, Cyriacus Allers, was way more skeptical. Allers noticed that Mary kept her knees pressed tightly together, and in the specimens he took back to London, he found the smoking gun, undigested hay and corn in the rabbit pellets. I mean, come on. These animals had clearly eaten food from a field, not developed inside a human. But despite all the skepticism, Mary was brought to London, and she became a national sensation. She was a living spectacle, put up in a bathhouse where the public, everyone from the working class to the aristocracy, lined up around the block to witness the miracle. But, a public spectacle like this couldn't last forever, especially not under the intense scrutiny she was about to face in London. So they put her under intense 24-hour observation, and the pressure just mounted. Days went by and nothing. No more rabbits. She kept up with the supposed labor pains and convulsions, but nothing was happening. And the doctors, well, they were getting really impatient. The whole case just collapsed, piece by piece. First, a porter gets caught trying to sneak a rabbit into her room, and he confesses that her sister-in-law bribed him. Then, a separate investigation discovers her husband had been quietly buying up small rabbits all over town for weeks. But the final straw came when this prominent doctor, Sir Richard Manningham, threatened to perform a painful exploratory surgery to find out once and for all what was going on inside her. And that was a threat she simply could not ignore. She finally broke down. She revealed the really painful and dangerous mechanics of the whole fraud. She explained that after she had a miscarriage, while her cervix was still open, an accomplice had inserted, the claws and body of a cat and the head of a rabbit. For the later births, she'd inserted the parts herself. And in her confession, she spread the blame around a lot. She implicated this mysterious traveling woman who supposedly gave her the idea, her mother-in-law, and her husband. And the motive? A promise of financial security. A promise that she would have a way out of the crushing poverty that had defined her entire life. It really suggests she wasn't just some cunning fraud, but maybe a desperate pawn in a bigger scheme. So, with the truth finally out, the public's fascination just instantly curdled into ridicule. The entire nation, which had been so captivated by this mystery, just erupted in laughter. And remember that ambitious royal surgeon, Saint Andre? Well, he had just published a detailed 40-page pamphlet staking his entire reputation on this case. You just can't make this up. His timing could not possibly have been worse. A mere 4 days after his big pamphlet hit the streets, Mary confessed. This absolute train wreck destroyed his credibility and made him the #1 target for public mockery. And this scandal became pure gold for the satirists of the day. The great artist William Hogarth created his famous engraving Cuniculari, which basically portrays all the doctors as bumbling, gullible fools. St. Andre was just savaged in poems and songs, while Mary Toft was caricatured in these fake confessions that painted her as a moral degenerate. The entire medical establishment just took a brutal beating in the press. So what happened to everyone? Well, the consequences for the main players varied pretty dramatically. Mary was charged as a vile cheat and imposter and thrown in prison for a bit, where crowds would actually pay to gawk at her. But the charges were eventually dropped. St. Andre's career, though, was completely over. And John Howard, the local surgeon who started it all, he paid a hefty fine but was actually able to go back and continue his practice. The scandal, though, left a permanent mark on all of them. So why does this nearly 300-year-old hoax still matter? I mean, what can we really take away from this incredibly strange episode in history? Well, this story is so much more than just a weird anecdote. It's a perfect window into a society that was caught between the beginnings of modern science and these lingering superstitions. It shows us how easily experts can be fooled when their own biases come into play, how quickly a sensational story can grip an entire nation, and how things like class and gender shaped who got to be believed and who just got ridiculed. I mean, Mary's body literally became a public battleground for male scientific authority. In the end, we're still left with questions, aren't we? Was Mary Toft a master manipulator? Was she a desperate woman who was pushed by her family into a dangerous and painful scheme just to escape poverty? Or was she somewhere in between? Her story is just this powerful reminder that truth can be way stranger than fiction, and that our collective hunger for a story that just defies belief is as strong now as it was all the way back in 1726.